Randomness has been in video games since the 70s, so in that time, game devs have done a lot of things with randomness. It's not just one thing you can put into a game, you can do so much with it. I want to talk about it. I want to start with what I think is simultaneously the best and worst of randomness in video games, Team Fortress 2's random crit system. For the uninitiated, Team Fortress 2 is the best online multiplayer shooter I've ever played, and there's a mechanic where outside of anyone's control, a hit will do 3 times its normal damage. If this sounds stupid and unbalanced, it's because it is. But holy hell, it is so fun when you're doing the damage. Outside of that, it's pretty bad. It's why the most popular collection of community servers for the game has its disabled. Now, do I think random crits should be removed? TF2 has so many forms of randomness, you could even argue that player behavior is a form of randomness. Spies, for example, have the ability to sneak behind enemy lines, so they have a tendency to just appear, and that can be really funny. It's the kind of thing you'd tell stories about. It'd be impossible to talk about all the forms of randomness in Team Fortress 2, and luckily, none of these additions became a massive scourge on the industry. Oh. Yeah, loot boxes are a big old dumb thing in the industry, to put it lightly, and I have to bear the shame of it starting in one of my favorite games of all time. But I would like to talk about a game that did loot boxes slightly better than most games, which is surprisingly enough, Overwatch. Overwatch had loot boxes. You could pay for loot boxes, but you got a loot box every single time you leveled up. Genuinely a good implementation. You got rewarded for playing the game with a random assortment of goodies, whether it be some dumb little voice line or a skin you really wanted. Now, of course, the negatives outweigh the positives here, since you could still pay real money for them, but in hindsight, I'd say this approach to game monetization is better than most stuff Activision Blizzard has done. And don't get me wrong, that is not a high bar. One thing that's rarely ever random, or done with the goal to be random, is game rosters. Video game rosters should typically be as balanced as possible. They aren't designed around randomness. But what if they were? WarioWare is a very random game. Every micro game you play is random, and you just have to figure it out in the limited time you're given. I'm bringing it up here because of what might be my personal favorite in the series, Get It Together, which is the only WarioWare game with a roster of playable characters. What makes this so special is that the roster exists to amplify the randomness. So as a result, you get characters that are very clearly better than others. For example, Ashley can fly and shoot in any direction. 9volt can't fly, you can't control what direction he moves in, and you can only shoot up. You cannot tell me the devs made these 2 characters and went, yeah, they're about on par. What the devs were thinking was, what if getting a certain character felt like a hazard? The result is a very random game with one of the most interesting takes on character balance I have ever seen. A roster that is supposed to have a good amount of bad characters. I've talked about a lot of implementations of randomness I've really liked in games, but the game I want to talk about now has all of these. And a big one I haven't talked about yet, random level generation, and as a result is easily the most random game I've ever played. SCP Secret Laboratory. SCP Secret Lab is a multiplayer game where the player is given specific goals depending on their character. I won't go over all of them, but the important one is that Class D and scientists must escape the facility without getting killed. The forms of randomness are very similar to what you would see in a roguelike. The layout is random, although individual rooms are reused from game to game. There are items in the rooms, but the items are random, and whether or not there even is an item will be random. These things aren't super interesting in themselves, so instead I want to talk about a more abstract form of randomness, player behavior. On top of all the typical stuff for a roguelike, you have to account for how everyone else is going to react. Can you trust a scientist with a high-level keycard to help you escape? If you cross paths with a facility guard or MTF, will you try to hide and find a new route, or have them detain you so you can escape with them? And that's assuming they will have the mercy to detain you. There's a very high likelihood they won't and will just kill you on sight. And that's it. Those are just a bunch of forms of randomness in games I really liked. I would love it if the entire comment section was just people listing forms of randomness they think are interesting in games. So, I'm inviting you to just comment whatever you want. And that's about it. Bye.